Welcome to this explainer. We're going to skip the usual pleasantries today and drop you right into the middle of one of the absolute most desperate moments in history. Today, we're looking at the story of Alfred the Great. He's the only English monarch to ever be given that title, and we're going to figure out exactly how he earned it.
Okay, so picture this. It's January 878 AD. You're the King of England, and you literally lose your entire country in a single night. Your Anglo-Saxon warriors are at home with their families. It's the Christmas and New Year period. Everyone's relaxed. And the absolute last thing anyone expects in the freezing depths of winter is a massive military campaign. But out of nowhere, a Viking leader named Guthrum launches this brutal surprise attack, and man, it works flawlessly. Alfred's forces are completely scattered, and he is driven straight out of his own kingdom. Following that surprise attack, this is what Alfred is reduced to. He has almost nothing left. He's just got this tiny band of followers, using the freezing marshes of Somerset, specifically an area called Athelney, just for cover. If you look at it from the outside, it's a problem with absolutely zero obvious solutions. The Vikings hold all the land, and Alfred, he's just a hunted man, hiding out in the mud. To really get the weight of this moment, it helps to understand who Alfred actually was before the total collapse. Born in 849 AD, he was the youngest son of King Ethelwulf. He was never even supposed to be king. He had 4 older brothers who all died before him, mostly fighting in these Viking wars. So he gets crowned in 871 AD at just 22 years old. In his early 20s, they were just a frantic scramble to survive impossible odds. He's fighting active Viking campaigns, sometimes paying them off with Danegeld just to buy a little time. He wasn't some grand, great king yet. He was just a young guy desperately trying to keep his head above water before the bottom completely fell out in that January 878 attack.
Section 1. The Climax. Rallying at Egbert's Stone.
But here's the thing about Alfred. He didn't just sit around wallowing in despair in that swamp. He spent months quietly gathering intelligence. Then he sends messengers slipping across Wessex with a simple but incredibly powerful message. The king is alive, and he is calling his loyal people to assemble. The response was overwhelming. Men just poured in from Somerset, Wiltshire, Hampshire. Within days, Alfred had a real army again. By May 878, just months after losing absolutely everything, his newly formed army meets Guthrum's forces in open combat at the Battle of Edington. The historical sources describe an absolutely massive, fierce fight, shield walls clashing, sustained combat all day long. And Alfred wins decisively. Guthrum's forces flee to their fortified camp, and Alfred just locks it down, besieging them for 2 unrelenting weeks until the Vikings finally surrender.
So, you've won the battle. Guthrum is defeated. What do you actually do with a defeated Viking warlord who literally just tried to steal your kingdom? Now, executing him would have been the completely normal, expected medieval response. But Alfred, he chose a shocking alternative that arguably saved England entirely.
What is truly fascinating here is how Alfred transformed his worst enemy into family. Instead of the axe, Alfred required Guthrum to be baptized as a Christian under the Treaty of Wedmore. Guthrum took the Christian name Athelstan, and get this, Alfred himself stood as his godfather. It is hands down one of the most remarkable acts of statesmanship in early medieval history. The pagan Viking war leader and the Christian English king symbolically became family, and the crazy part, the peace treaty actually held.
Section 2. Rebuilding a Broken Kingdom.
Now, winning the war and securing peace was great, but it was really just the beginning. To make sure Wessex could never ever collapse so quickly again, Alfred instituted a brilliantly simple rule, and it all centered around the number 20. He started building a completely new network of fortified towns, which they called burhs.
You can see the brilliant network effect perfectly right here. These burhs were strategically positioned so that absolutely no part of Wessex was more than 20 miles away from one. Why 20 miles? Because it meant that any new Viking raid could be met with a fully armed military response within a single day. This logistical masterpiece completely flipped the strategic situation and made a repeat of that 878 collapse totally impossible.
But Alfred knew a kingdom was more than just a bunch of forts. Look at these reforms. He establishes a court school. He personally translates Latin texts into Old English himself. He insists that the sons of freemen be taught to read. And he creates a unified law code drawing on earlier Saxon, Kentish, and Mercian laws, literally laying the foundation of English common law. In an age of widespread illiteracy, these educational and legal reforms were genuinely revolutionary. Imagine building the foundation of common law and public literacy from scratch while you are still actively fending off Viking raids.
Section 3. The Man Behind the Myth. Naturally, because of all these incredible achievements, as the centuries rolled by, the real Alfred got replaced by these towering legends. You might have actually heard the most famous one, the burnt cakes. The legend goes that while hiding in the marshes, he sheltered with a peasant woman. He was so stressed out worrying about his kingdom that he let her cakes burn in the fire, and she scolded him, having no idea he was the king. It's a wonderful image, right? But historians are pretty certain this popular story was completely invented about a century after his death, likely just to make a moral point about humility and distraction. The real Alfred was a far more formidable figure than that.
If you want to see what his genuine humility actually looked like, forget the cakes and look no further than this quote. After teaching himself Latin as an adult, which, by the way, is wildly impressive for a guy who spent his 20s fighting wars, he personally translated major texts by Gregory the Great and Boethius. And in his preface, he wrote this unexpectedly charming translator's note. He apologizes for any errors and asks readers who knew better to correct him. The King of England basically apologizing for possibly getting his homework wrong. It shows a genuine, really impressive kind of humility.
Section 4. The ultimate knowledge check. All right, we've covered a whole lot of ground today, from freezing swamps to common law, so let's lock in what we've learned with a rapid-fire quiz. I'm going to ask a question, and you'll have exactly 4 seconds to think of the answer before I reveal it. Let's see how much you retained.
Question 1. Think way back to our opening scene in the dead of winter. 4 seconds, starting now.
Yep, he was the victim of a brutal surprise attack. He went from ruling Wessex to hiding out in a freezing swamp in Somerset with just a tiny group of followers, all in a single night.
Question 2, fast forward a bit to May of that same year, 878 AD. What happened at Edington? 4 seconds.
He didn't just win decisively with those shield walls, he besieged Guthrum for 2 weeks. But the real kicker? Instead of executing him, he defeated his enemy and then turned him into his godson through forced baptism.
Question 3. Remember that crucial magic number we talked about when he was rebuilding his kingdom? 4 seconds on the clock.
The burhs, they were a network of fortified towns. And because no part of Wessex was more than 20 miles away from one, it guaranteed a one-day military response time to any raid. Brilliant logistical strategy that made another sudden collapse impossible. Question 4. What did he do that was considered genuinely revolutionary for his time regarding education? 4 seconds.
He established a court school, translated major Latin texts into Old English himself, and pushed for the sons of freemen to learn to read. He totally understood that a kingdom needed way more than just swords to survive. It needed literacy and common law.
And finally, question 5. So, the crucial point is, was he given the title the Great just for surviving that winter and winning a war, or because he used that victory to completely transform law, education, and defense at England's most desperate moment? I think we all know the answer. He earned the title because he didn't just rescue his kingdom, he fundamentally rebuilt it from the ground up to ensure it would actually last. A true strategic innovator. So it leaves us with a really provocative question to ponder. If your entire world collapsed overnight, would you secure your future by just building walls, or would you ensure it by building schools? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.